March 12, 2021. A mother made a decision that would destroy 3 lives forever. She stood in the doorway of her children's bedroom, watching them sleep for what she knew would be the last time. Zion and Zara Williams, 12-year-old twins who had always protected each other, and 9-year-old Amari, the baby of the house who called her mama in his sweet, innocent voice. She packed her bags, grabbed her keys, walked out the door, and never looked back. But here's what makes this case absolutely unbelievable. She didn't abandon them for a few days. She didn't leave them for a few weeks. She left them for 3 years. 3 whole years. 1,095 days of complete abandonment. Inside that cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Miami, 3 children would learn to survive. Without parents, without supervision, without any adult caring whether they lived or died. But here's the part that will make your blood boil. Their mother, Valencia Brooks, didn't just walk away and forget about them. She planned their abandonment. Every single month for 3 years, she paid their rent. Every single Tuesday for 3 years, she arranged food deliveries. Just enough to keep them alive. Just enough to avoid being charged with murder. But she never, not once, came back to see them. What you're about to hear will shock you. It will anger you. And it will make you question how something like this could happen in modern America. But most importantly, it's a story that needs to be told. Because right now, as you're listening to this, there might be children in your own neighborhood who are invisible, forgotten, abandoned. Children who are waiting for someone, anyone, to notice they exist. Before we dive deep into this case, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because this story will stay with you long after it's over. And it might just save a child's life. To understand how a mother could abandon her children for 3 years, you have to understand Valencia Brooks. At 35 years old, she was a woman who had spent her entire adult life running from responsibility. But Valencia wasn't born into chaos. She wasn't raised in poverty or abuse. She grew up in a middle-class home in Atlanta, Georgia. Her parents, Robert and Diana Brooks, gave her every opportunity to succeed. Private school, dance lessons, family vacations. By all accounts, Valencia was loved, supported, and given everything a child could want. But even as a teenager, there were warning signs. Valencia craved attention. She needed to be the center of every room, the star of every story. She learned early that her looks could get her whatever she wanted. At 16, she was dating older men with cars and money. At 17, she was pregnant with her first child. Her parents were devastated. "We raised her better than this," Diana Brooks would later tell investigators. "We don't know where we went wrong." But Valencia didn't see her pregnancy as a mistake. She saw it as an opportunity. The baby's father was 23-year-old Marcus Williams, a community college student who worked part-time in an auto shop. He wasn't wealthy, but he was older, and that made Valencia feel mature and sophisticated. She named the baby Essence, and immediately began planning how this child would improve her life. "I thought having a baby would make Marcus want to marry me," she later admitted. "I thought it would make us a real family." But Marcus had other plans. The moment Essence was born, he disappeared. No child support, no contact, no help of any kind. Valencia was 17 years old with a newborn baby, and no idea how to take care of her. But rather than step up and learn to be a mother, Valencia made her first abandonment decision. She gave Essence to her mother. "I'm too young for this," she told her parents. "I need to finish school and figure out my life." Diana Brooks agreed to raise her granddaughter, thinking it would be temporary. Valencia said she just needed a year to get on her feet, Diana recalled. "We thought we were helping." But Valencia had no intention of taking Essence back. She learned something important. Children were obstacles to the life she wanted, and obstacles could be removed. Valencia moved to Miami in 1999, telling everyone she was pursuing modeling opportunities. She was beautiful enough to model, but she lacked the discipline and work ethic required. Instead, she drifted from job to job, waitressing retail, brief stints as a club promoter. She learned to live off men. There was always a boyfriend willing to pay her rent, buy her clothes, take her out to expensive dinners. Valencia perfected the art of being the perfect girlfriend. Sexy, fun, carefree. The kind of woman men want to be seen with. But there was one rule in all her relationships: no serious commitments. She didn't want marriage. She didn't want children. She wanted freedom. For 6 years, this lifestyle worked perfectly. Then, in 2005, she met Marcus Richard, not the same Marcus from her teenage years. This was a different Marcus, a construction worker who was charming, handsome, and completely infatuated with Valencia. They moved in together within 3 months. For the first time since leaving Atlanta, Valencia felt like she might want something permanent. Marcus talked about marriage, about buying a house, about building a life together, and Valencia let herself believe it could happen. Then she got pregnant, not with one baby, with twins. Marcus was initially excited. Twins? We're going to have twins, baby. But as Valencia's pregnancy progressed, Marcus began to change. The reality of supporting 3 people on a construction worker's salary was overwhelming. He started working longer hours, staying out later, coming home drunk more often. By the time Zion and Zara were born in 2009, Marcus was already emotionally checked out. When the twins were 6 months old, he left. No warning, no explanation, no forwarding address. Valencia woke up one morning to find a note on the kitchen table. "I can't do this. I'm sorry. I'll send money when I can." He never sent money, and Valencia never saw him again. Now she was 26 years old with 2 babies and no support system. She burned bridges with her family when she refused to take responsibility for her essence. She had no real job skills and no education beyond high school. For the first time in her life, Valencia was truly trapped, but she was also resourceful. She learned to work the system like a professional: government assistance, food stamps, WIC, housing vouchers, child care assistance. Valencia discovered that being a struggling single mother came with benefits: sympathy, financial help, and excuses for why she couldn't be expected to do more. She moved the twins to a subsidized apartment in Overtown, Miami, a rough neighborhood where nobody asked too many questions and everyone minded their own business. Perfect for a woman who didn't want scrutiny. But Valencia still didn't want to be a mother. She saw Zion and Zara as burdens, not blessings. When they cried, she felt annoyed, not concerned. When they needed attention, she felt trapped, not loving. When they got sick, she felt inconvenienced, not worried. The twins learned early that they couldn't depend on their mother for comfort or care. When they were hungry, they learned to make their own cereal. When they were scared, they learned to comfort each other. When they needed help, they learned to figure out themselves. Valencia was physically present, but emotionally absent. She spent her days sleeping off hangovers and her nights at clubs, looking for her next boyfriend. The twins were often left with neighbors or locked in the apartment while Valencia went out. She'd come back smelling like men and liquor, one former neighbor recalled. Those babies were raising themselves. When the twins were 3 years old, Valencia met another man. This one was different. He had money, a nice car, and he made her feel special again. But there was a problem. He didn't want children. So Valencia got creative. She started leaving the twins with neighbors more often, sometimes for days at a time. She told her new boyfriend that she was between apartments and staying with friends. This arrangement worked for a few months, until Valencia got pregnant again, this time with Amari. The boyfriend disappeared the moment he found out, and Valencia was left with 3 children under the age of 4. By now, a pattern was clear. Valencia attracted men who didn't want children, and children scare away the men Valencia wanted. In her mind, there was only one solution: make the children less visible. Over the next few years, Zion, Zara, and Amari learned to be ghosts in their own home. They were quiet when Valencia brought men over. They stayed in their room when she was entertaining. They learned that their needs came last. Always. Valencia perfected the art of hiding her children while still collecting benefits for them. She knew exactly what to say to social workers to avoid scrutiny. The children were homeschooled when they asked about school. They were shy when asked why workers never saw them. They were with their father when visits were scheduled. Valencia had learned the game every system designed to protect children. And for years it worked, until 2021, when she met Demetrius Taylor. Demetrius was everything Valencia had always wanted. 42 years old, a successful landscaping business, a beautiful house in an upscale neighborhood. And most importantly, he was looking for a serious relationship. But Demetrius had one non-negotiable requirement. I don't do kids. He'd been clear from their first date. I'm at a stage in my life where I want to focus on my partner, he told her. I don't want to be anybody's stepfather. Valencia saw her chance at a life she'd always dreamed of. But there was a problem. She had 3 children. Zion and Zara were now 12 years old. Amari was 9. They couldn't be hidden anymore. They were too old, too aware, too present. So Valencia made a decision that would destroy their lives. If she couldn't hide her children, she would erase them. She would create a new identity for herself. A woman who had never been married, never had children, never had responsibilities. She would start fresh, and Zion, Zara, and Amari would simply disappear. The planning began in January 2021. Valencia researched automatic bill pay systems. She looked into grocery delivery services. She told the children's school she was switching to permanent homeschooling. She prepared her children for an abandonment she presented as temporary. Mama's going to go handle some business, she told them. You're big kids now. You can take care of yourself for a little while. She made it sound like an adventure, an opportunity for them to prove how mature they were. She never told them it would be forever. March 12, 2021. Valencia Brooks looked at her 3 children for the last time. She felt no sadness, no regret, no maternal instinct. She felt relief. Finally, she could live the life she'd always wanted, without the burden of children she'd never wanted in the first place. She walked out that door and never looked back. And for 3 years, she lived like her children had never existed. The automatic food delivery service was set up using her government assistance card. The rent was arranged to be automatically deducted from the joint account she'd opened with Demetrius. He thought it was for a storage unit. She'd even practiced a lie she would tell Demetrius about her past. Everything was in place for her new life, the life where Zion, Zara, and Amari didn't exist. She walked to the kitchen and scribbled a note on a piece of paper. Gonna handle some business. Food coming every Tuesday. Rent paid. Utilities paid. Automatic. Don't answer the door for nobody. Don't go outside. Back soon. Mama. She left the note on the kitchen counter, grabbed her suitcase, and walked toward the door. For just a moment, she paused. From the bedroom, she could hear 9-year-old Amari talking in his sleep. Mama, Mama, where? Valencia felt a flicker of something. Guilt, love, regret. But then her phone buzzed. A text from Demetrius. Can't wait to start our new life together, baby. You ready? And just like that, whatever maternal feeling she might have had was gone. She walked out the door, locked it behind her, and drove away. She never looked back. The children woke up around 9 a.m. to silence. This wasn't unusual. Mama was often gone in the mornings, sometimes not coming home until the next day. 12-year-old Zion, the older twin by 4 minutes, automatically took charge. He'd been doing this for years. Come on, y'all, he said to his siblings. Let's get some breakfast. Zara and Amari followed him to the kitchen, their bare feet sticking to the dirty linoleum floor. Zion opened the refrigerator, nearly empty except for some leftover takeout and a half-gallon of milk that smelled sour. He divided the takeout into 3 portions, heated it in the microwave, and they ate in silence. It was only when Amari asked, "Where's Mama?" that Zion noticed a note. He read it aloud to his siblings, sounding out the words carefully. Gonna handle some business. Food coming every Tuesday. Rent paid, utilities paid, automatic. Don't answer the door for nobody. Don't go outside. Back soon. Mama, what kind of business? Zara asked. Zion shrugged. Mama business. She'll be back. They spent the day watching cartoons and playing with broken toys. Every time they heard footsteps in the hallway, they looked toward the door hopefully. But Valencia never came. By the 3rd day, Even Zion was getting worried. Mama had been gone for long periods before, but she usually called. Their phone, an old landline that barely worked, hadn't rung once. The food was running dangerously low. Zion searched every cabinet, finding only a box of stale crackers, some peanut butter, and a can of soup. "We need to make this last," he told his siblings, rationing the food into tiny portions. Amari started crying. "I want Mama," he sobbed. "When is she coming back?" Zion didn't have an answer. For the first time in his 12 years of life, he was truly afraid. Tuesday morning, there was a knock at the door. The children froze. Mama had always told them, "Don't answer the door for nobody." But what if it was her? What if she'd lost her keys? Zion crept to the door and listened. "Delivery for Brooks." A voice called out. He looked through the peephole and saw a man in a uniform holding grocery bags. The children waited until the man left, then slowly opened the door. Sitting outside were 4 bags of groceries: cereal, canned ravioli, instant ramen, crackers, juice boxes, peanut butter, bread, basic survival food. Nothing fresh. Nothing that required refrigeration. Nothing that required cooking skills. The children dragged the bags inside, their stomachs growling with hunger. For the first time in days, they had enough to eat, but still no sign of Mama. "See," Zion told his siblings, trying to sound confident. "Mama's taking care of us. She's coming back." But deep down, he was starting to doubt it. A routine began to form. Every Tuesday, groceries appeared outside their door. The children learned to listen for the delivery truck, waiting until the coast was clear before bringing the food inside. By the end of the first month, the children had stopped asking when Mama was coming back. They created their own little world inside that apartment. They played games with broken toys. They told each other stories. They took care of each other when someone was sick. But they were also starting to deteriorate. Without proper nutrition, they were losing weight. Without regular hygiene, they were developing rashes and infections. Without education, they were falling behind academically. Without social interaction, they were forgetting how to communicate with the outside world. Zion was trying his best to be the adult, but he was still just a 12-year-old boy. When Amari had nightmares, Zion didn't know how to comfort him. When Zara got sick with a fever, Zion didn't know what medicine to give her. When the toilet started backing up, Zion didn't know how to fix it. He was learning adult responsibilities without any adult guidance, and it was breaking him. By the 3rd month, the apartment was starting to smell. Not just the smell of unwashed bodies and dirty clothes, but the smell of decay. The toilet had stopped working properly, and the children were using corners of the apartment as bathrooms. The sink was clogged with food scraps and dirty dishes. Bugs were starting to appear, roaches, ants, even mice. The children's hair was becoming matted and tangled. Their nails were growing long and dirty. Their clothes were falling apart. But the psychological changes were even worse. The children were becoming withdrawn and depressed. They spent most of their days sleeping. When they were awake, they barely spoke to each other. The joy had gone out of their lives. They were surviving, but they weren't living. By the 6th month, the children had almost completely withdrawn from reality. They barely ate, even when food was available. They slept most of the day and wandered the apartment like ghosts at night. They communicated mostly through gestures and grunts. The outside world had become foreign to them. When they heard voices in the hallway, they were afraid. When they saw sunlight through the windows, it hurt their eyes. Amari had regressed significantly. At 10 years old, he was acting like a much younger child. He wet himself regularly. He sucked his thumb constantly. He cried often but quietly, having learned that no one would come to comfort him. Their nails were so long they curved like claws. Their skin was covered in sores and rashes. Their teeth were black stumps. But the worst damage was invisible. They had forgotten how to trust. They had forgotten how to love. They had forgotten how to hope. They had survived 1,095 days of complete abandonment, but they had paid a price that might never be recoverable. February 18th, 2024, the day everything changed. For 3 years, the children had lived in complete isolation. For 3 years, no adult had checked on them. For 3 years, they had been invisible to the world. But on February 18th, 2024, someone finally noticed. Michelle Rodriguez had been living in apartment 4C for exactly 3 weeks when she first heard the sounds. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night, and she was trying to get her 2-year-old daughter back to sleep after a nightmare. That's when she heard it, through the thin walls, shuffling, scraping, like something being dragged across the floor. But no voices, no conversation, no normal sounds of human activity. Michelle pressed her ear to the wall that separated her apartment from 4B. The sounds continued. Movement, but not normal movement. It sounded almost animal-like. Michelle tried to convince herself it was nothing. Maybe the sounds were coming from upstairs. Maybe it was rats in the walls. Maybe she was just tired and imagining things. But over the next few days, the sounds continued. Always at night. Always strange. Always unsettling. Michelle started paying attention to the apartment next door during the day. She never saw anyone come or go. Never heard normal sounds. No TV, no music, no conversation. Never saw lights in the windows. It was like the apartment was empty. But then, why were there sounds at night? Michelle was a mother who had learned to trust her instincts. And her instincts were telling her something was very wrong. She started asking other neighbors about apartment 4B. "Oh, that's the Brooks place," said Mrs. Johnson from 4A. "Valencia Brooks and her kids." "How many kids?" Michelle asked. "3, I think. Haven't seen them in a while, though." "What do you mean, a while?" Mrs. Johnson shrugged. "Months, maybe?" That woman was always coming and going. Never was much of a mother, if you ask me. March 12th, 2024. Exactly 3 years after Valencia Brooks walked out, Michelle Rodriguez heard something that made her blood run cold. Crying. Not the crying of an adult. The crying of a child. Soft. Muffled. Heartbreaking sobs coming through the wall. Michelle grabbed her phone and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? "I need to report a welfare check. I think there are children in the apartment next to me, but I never see any adults." "What's the address?" Michelle gave the address and apartment number. "How long have you been hearing these sounds?" 3 weeks since I moved in, but my neighbors say they haven't seen the family in months. We'll send someone to check it out. The knock, March 13th, 2024, 8:30 a.m. Officers Maria Santos and James Wright stood outside apartment 4B. They'd seen everything in their combined 30 years on the force. But nothing could prepare them for what they were about to discover. Officer Santos knocked on the door. "Miami police. We're doing a welfare check." Silence. She knocked again, harder. "Hello? Is anyone home?" This time they heard something. A shuffling sound, like someone dragging their feet across the floor. Then a voice. Small, frightened, barely audible. "Go away." The officers exchanged a look. That was definitely a child's voice. "Sweetie, we're police officers," Santos called out gently. "We just want to make sure you're okay. Can you open the door?" "No. Mama said never open the door for nobody." "Where's your mama, honey?" A long pause. "She's not here." "When did you last see her?" Another pause. Even longer. "I don't remember." Officer Wright stepped closer to the door. "Son, what's your name?" "Zion." "How old are you, Zion?" 14. Both officers were stunned. That voice sounded much younger than 14. "Are there other children in there with you?" "My sister and brother." "What about adults? Are there any grown-ups in there?" The longest pause yet. "Mama's not here." "When did she leave?" "I don't know. A long time ago." The officers knew they had a serious situation. After what felt like an eternity, they heard the slow scraping of a chain being removed, the click of a deadbolt turning, the creak of a door slowly opening. And then, Officer Santos had to cover her mouth to keep from gasping. Standing in the doorway was a teenage boy who looked like he'd been raised by wolves. His hair hung down to his shoulders in thick, matted clumps that looked like they hadn't been washed in years. His fingernails were over an inch long, curved and yellow like claws. His clothes were rags that barely covered his skeletal frame. At 14 years old, Zion looked like he was 10 due to severe malnutrition. His skin was covered in dirt, rashes, and open sores. But it was his eyes that broke their hearts. They were the eyes of someone who had given up hope long ago. Behind him, two other figures cowered in the shadows. A girl who looked identical to him, except her hair was even longer and more matted, and a smaller boy, gripping a filthy stuffed animal and staring at the officers with wide, terrified eyes. The smell that wafted out of the apartment was overwhelming. Human waste, rotting food, decay, death. It was the smell of children who had been forgotten by the world. Jesus Christ, Officer Wright whispered under his breath. He immediately called for backup, paramedics, and child protective services. Within minutes, the apartment was swarming with officials, but the children were terrified of all the adults suddenly filling their space. They huddled together in a corner, communicating through grunts and gestures. As investigators began documenting the scene, the true horror became clear. The apartment was uninhabitable, trash piled everywhere, food containers molding on every surface. Human waste in corners where the children had relieved themselves when the toilet stopped working. The windows were covered with blankets, blocking out all natural light. Detective Sarah Martinez arrived on the scene and immediately began investigating. Her first question was obvious. Where was Valencia Brooks? The rent was being paid automatically from a joint bank account, Valencia Brooks and Demetrius Taylor. A quick database search revealed that Demetrius Taylor owned a landscaping business in Coral Springs. Detective Martinez had found her first lead, but as she looked at those 3 broken children being loaded into ambulances, she made a promise. Valencia Brooks was going to pay for what she had done. The manhunt for one of the worst mothers in America was about to begin. While Zion, Zara, and Amari were being rushed to Jackson Memorial Hospital, Detective Sarah Martinez was piecing together one of the most shocking cases of child abandonment in Miami's history. The first break came quickly. The automatic rent payments were coming from a joint account registered to Valencia Brooks and Demetrius Taylor. Most people who abandon their children don't keep paying rent, Martinez told her partner. This woman is hiding something. A quick search revealed that Demetrius Taylor owned Taylor Landscaping, a successful business in Coral Springs. The address led to an upscale neighborhood, a world away from the squalor where the children had been found. While her children were suffering in that apartment, Valencia had been living a life of luxury. Charges at expensive restaurants, designer clothing stores, spa treatments, vacation bookings. In 3 years, she'd spent over $75,000 on herself, while sending $20 worth of groceries to her children each week. The financial trail led Martinez directly to Demetrius Taylor's address. February 25, 2024, 5 days after the children were discovered, Detective Martinez stood outside a beautiful house in Coral Springs, steeling herself for what she was about to uncover. The house was a mansion. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, swimming pool, 3-car garage. A brand new BMW sat in the driveway. This was where Valencia Brooks had been living while her children slowly died in squalor. Martinez knocked on the door. It was answered by a well-dressed woman with perfect hair and a fresh manicure. Valencia Brooks looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine. "Can I help you?" Valencia asked with a smile. "Valencia Brooks?" "Yes. I'm Detective Martinez with Miami PD. We need to talk." Valencia's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Is everything okay?" "Ma'am, when was the last time you saw your children?" The color drained from Valencia's face. She knew it was over. What children?" Martinez couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Your children, ma'am. Zion, Zara, and Amari Brooks. When did you last see them?" "I can explain. You're under arrest for child abandonment and neglect." As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Valencia finally broke down. But she wasn't crying for her children. She was crying for herself. "I paid the rent," she screamed as Martinez put her in the police car. "I made sure they had food. I didn't abandon them." But everyone who heard those words knew the truth. Valencia Brooks had abandoned her children in the worst possible way. She kept them barely alive while erasing them from her life. Back at the station, Detective Martinez sat across from Valencia Brooks in a small, windowless room. Gone was the confident, well-dressed woman from Coral Springs. Valencia looked small, frightened, and cornered. "Valencia, your children were found in conditions that most people wouldn't keep animals in," Martinez began. "They're 15, and 12 years old, and they can barely speak in complete sentences. I made sure they had food. Processed food delivered once a week. No fresh fruits or vegetables. No milk. No proper nutrition for growing children. I paid the rent." "You paid the rent, so you wouldn't get in trouble for having 3 children living alone in an apartment with no adult supervision." "I was going to come back." "When, Valencia?" "It's been 3 years. 3 years." Martinez pulled out photos from the apartment. Valencia winced when she saw them. "Your son Zion's scratch tally marks on the wall." Martinez continued. 1,095 marks. "He was counting the days until you came back. Did you know he tried to call you?" Valencia's eyes widened. "He called you 3 times in the first 2 months. You never answered. You never called back." Tears began streaming down Valencia's face, but Martinez wasn't finished. "While your children were living like animals, you were posting on Instagram about your blessed life. You went to Bahamas. Twice. You bought a BMW. Tell me how a mother does that," Martinez demanded. "Tell me how you sleep at night, knowing your children are suffering while you're living in a mansion." Finally, Valencia broke down and told the truth. She'd moved in with Demetrius and told him she had no children. She created an entirely new identity for herself. She'd gotten a job at a high-end boutique, telling co-workers she was childless and carefree. For 3 years, she lived like she never had children at all. "I just wanted to be happy," she cried. "I never wanted to be a mother. I never asked for this." Martinez stared at her in disgust. "But you were a mother, Valencia. You had 3 children who needed you, and you threw them away like garbage." While Valencia was being interrogated, detectives were also questioning Demetrius Taylor. What they discovered was almost as shocking as Valencia's abandonment. Demetrius genuinely had no idea that Valencia had children. "She told me she'd never been married, never had kids," he told investigators, his voice shaking. "She said she was focused on her career and hadn't found the right man to settle down with." Demetrius was 42 years old, successful, and had been looking for a serious relationship. "I was clear from the beginning that I didn't want to be anyone's stepfather," he explained. "I wanted a partner, not a ready-made family." Valencia had been so convincing in her lies that Demetrius never suspected the truth. "She worked late sometimes, said she was covering shifts at the boutique," he continued. "She got phone calls she said were from her boss. She never acted like someone who had children depending on her." When investigators asked about the rent payments, Demetrius was confused. "She told me she was paying for a storage unit where she kept family belongings," he said. "Photos, furniture from her grandmother, that kind of thing. It wasn't that much money, so I never questioned it." The revelation that Valencia had been paying for her children's apartment while telling her boyfriend it was for storage showed the calculated nature of her deception. "If I had known those kids existed, I would have called the police myself," Demetrius told investigators, tears in his eyes. "No child deserves what they went through." Prosecutors considered charging Demetrius as an accessory, but the evidence was overwhelming. He was another victim of Valencia's lies. He cooperated fully with the investigation, turning over all financial records and communication with Valencia. As the investigation continued, more evidence emerged of Valencia's callous indifference. Social media posts showed her living her best life while her children suffered. Photos from expensive restaurants while her children ate canned ravioli. Vacation pictures from Bahamas while her children hadn't seen sunlight in months. Shopping sprees of designer clothes while her children wore rags. Bank records showed she received over $18,000 in child support payments from Marcus Williams over 3 years. She'd used that money meant to support her children, to fund her new lifestyle. Meanwhile, she continued collecting government assistance by claiming the children who lived with her were homeschooled and were shy. She'd even submitted fake homeschool progress reports to avoid welfare check-ins. The most damning evidence was a recorded phone call between Valencia and a friend from 2 years after the abandonment. "Girl, I am living my best life," Valencia could be heard saying. "No drama, no stress. No kids crying, asking for stuff. I finally found the life I was meant to live." When her friend asked about her children, Valencia laughed. "What children? I don't have any children." She had completely erased them from her mind. As prosecutors built their case, they knew they had an airtight conviction. The note Valencia left, proof of premeditation. The financial records, proof of her lavish lifestyle. The social media posts, proof of her indifference. The phone calls, proof she knew her children were trying to reach her. The medical records, proof of the irreparable harm done to 3 innocent lives. Valencia Brooks was going to prison for a very long time. But the question remained, would justice truly be served? Could any punishment be enough for what she had done to Zion, Zara, and Amari? The trial was set to begin in 6 months. Valencia Brooks was sentenced to 45 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for 25 years. The judge called it the most callous case of child abandonment she had ever seen. Today, Valencia sits in Lowell Correctional Institution. She's never expressed genuine remorse for abandoning her children. Zion, Zara, and Amari were placed with experienced foster parents Marcus and Kesha Johnson. The children are slowly healing, but the trauma will last forever. This case haunts me because it shows how children can become invisible in plain sight. For 3 years, these kids lived surrounded by neighbors, yet no one noticed they were gone. Schools didn't follow up. Social services lost track. The community looked the other way. Valencia Brooks exploited every gap in our child protection system. She proved that if you know how to game the system, children can simply disappear. The real question isn't just how Valencia could do this. It's how we all let it happen. As you go about your life, pay attention to the children in your community. The kids you never see playing outside, the families that seem isolated, the children who might be waiting for someone to notice they exist. Don't assume someone else is watching. Don't assume someone else will step in. Because somewhere, right now, there might be another Zion, Zara, and Amari waiting for someone to save them before it's too late. If this story moved you, share it, subscribe, and most importantly, pay attention to the children around you, because every child deserves better than what Valencia Brooks gave her 3. This is Ruthless Realities. Until next time.